Hi, my name is Dr. Ross Hauser. Welcome to the Hauser Neck Center in Fort Myers, Florida. At the end of this video, you're going to see an interview of a patient of mine who's had dramatic improvement in light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, and a type of seizure disorder that's from their temporal lobes. So that's at the end of the video. So if you just want to watch that, just go toward the end of the video. I wanted to explain, some of the pathophysiology of light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, and there's one slide on the brain. What's interesting to me is just how frequent there's light sensitivity. Like, you just see everybody wearing sunglasses now. And then even when I'm at church, one time I was showing Marion, I said, how can you tell, looking at the stage during the singing portion of church, of who has a neck problem? And she wasn't quite sure. And you could see that there's some singers up there with the bright lights. There's some singers up there with the bright lights and their eyes are totally open, and then they're singing. And there's some singers up there like the whole time their eyes are closed. And all those people with their eyes closed, and I'm not saying every person who's a singer on a stage has light sensitivity, but that's a telltale sign. If every time in the sunlight you have to wear sunglasses or the light hurts your eyes, it's likely you have cervical instability. And cervical instability is a progressive disorder. Then sound sensitivity is the same thing. So churches, there's some people that say, oh, the sound's too loud, the sound's too loud, the sound's too loud. Where other people are like, the sound's fine. Sound sensitivity, light sensitivity, meaning that light that shouldn't irritate you, it does, or sound, and it could be the sound of your own voice, could be a pen, could be chewing, could be, you can't go to coffee houses anymore, you can't go to a restaurant because the sound, it's just driving you crazy, sound sensitivity. Those stem from a neck problem, in my opinion. And I'll explain some of the pathophysiology. And this just shows misophonia or sound sensitivity. It can be irritating to a person: chewing, swallowing, pen clicking, sniffling, ticking clocks, throat clearing. And this just explains, ligamentous cervical instability causes all kinds of sensitivities. It can make somebody more prone to stress. You can have chemical or allergic sensitivity, sensitivity to touch, mast cell activation, chemical sensitivity syndrome, cough hypersensitivity syndrome. See where it says ligamentous cervical instability causes internal jugular vein compression. You get the cerebral spinal fluid then can accumulate on the eye nerve or other cranial nerves. If the impulses in the trigeminal cranial nerve 5 or the facial nerve cranial nerve 7, if those don't go normally, those nerve impulses don't go normally, there's two muscles that curb sound. One is called the tensor veli palatini muscle that's innervated by the trigeminal nerve, and the other muscle is called the stapedius muscle that's innervated by cranial nerve 7. So those can all stem from ligamentous cervical instability causing a breakdown of the cervical curve, blocking the jugular vein, leading to extra fluid around those nerves, giving sound sensitivity. Light sensitivity is interesting. Can involve the optic nerve or eye nerve, but more likely than not involves the superior cervical sympathetic ganglion that sits right at C2. And again, this is just another way to note it, that you can get hypersensitivity to smell, to stress, to touch, to electromagnetic energy. All kinds of hypersensitivity syndromes can stem from ligamentous cervical instability. So ligamentous cervical instability can affect all the various cranial nerves. When it involves cranial nerve 7 or cranial nerve 5, you get hyperacusis or sensitivity to sound. And then when it affects the vagus nerve, superior cervical sympathetic ganglion, you get light sensitivity. So ligamentous upper cervical instability through various mechanisms leads to light sensitivity and sound sensitivity. So the testing that a person with light sensitivity or sound sensitivity that they should get is evaluations for upper cervical instability. And we do that in the office here by digital motion x-ray or motion x-ray. Vagus nerve, the vagus nerve is the body's sensory nerve. In other words, how the brain knows what's going on in the body, how is digestion, how's breathing, how's your stress in your life, how's your heart doing, how's your colon doing, gallbladder, all that is through the vagus nerve. So you can imagine if somebody has a breakdown of the cervical curve injuring the vagus nerve, that can cause a host of problems, anywhere from leaky gut, fibromyalgia, to heart arrhythmia, increased intestinal permeability leading to leaky gut, chronic yeast infections, SIBO, small intestinal bowel overgrowth, mast cell activation syndrome, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and ultimately it can lead to light sensitivity too. Just to go over the process of hearing, sound waves go through the ear, they hit the tympanic membrane, there's vibration. That vibration is carried through various bones called the malleus incus stapes bones, and then those bones vibrate, and that ultimately goes to the organ of hearing, which is cranial nerve 8, the vestibular cochlear nerve. So anywhere along that path could affect hearing, and meaning you could hear less or you could hear more. Sound sensitivity, it's unbelievable. Light sensitivity and sound sensitivity, it's a humongous amount of population. Look at this. If you actually research it, you realize 20 to 40% of the population has noise sensitivity. 12% it's severe, so that's a large percentage of the population. And I think it's growing because of the breakdown of the cervical curve, because of all the cell phone use. If you look in the medical literature, there's lots of different causes of sound sensitivity. The main one that we see is called cervical instability or cervical destructure. I've seen people with horrible sound sensitivity after various brain and ear surgeries. Obviously, psychological personality disorders, head injuries, neck injuries can obviously lead to sound sensitivity. Tensor tympani muscle, stapes muscle, those are the two muscles that dampen the vibration of the bones that are in the inner ear. So if those muscles aren't working correctly, sound is heightened. So a sound that normally wouldn't be painful or irritating is irritating, and that's called misophonia or hyperacusis. And then this just talks about the stapedius muscle that's innervated by the facial nerve, and when that muscle isn't working, you get sound sensitivity. It's a very, very small muscle. Light sensitivity, again, the number one cause that we see in the office here is from the pupils being too dilated, and that's something you can look in a mirror. Like you could say there's a husband and a wife or partners, you could just look at and see which one of you has bigger pupils. That's the person that might get light sensitivity, because the pupils, if they're too big, they let too much light in, and then the light starts hurting the eyes. This is one of the feral kitty cats that's around the office here. We called this kitty cat Prolo. You could see normal eye, dilated eye. So this kitty cat probably has instability on the one side of their body. This person, dilated pupil, normal pupil. So again, just look in the mirror and you could see whether or not your pupils are more dilated than other people. And especially if you have light sensitivity, the cause of your light sensitivity is likely the pupils are too dilated. Pupil dilation also raises eye pressure. If you've been told you have high eye pressure, it can be because your pupils are dilated, and the most common cause that we find of that is a neck problem, especially at the C1, C2 level. So we do pupillometry. It's a computer. It can show how the pupils react to light and give us a precise pupillary diameter. And as we treat people with cervical curve correction and prolotherapy, the irritation of the nerves that lead to the pupil dilation are less, so the pupil diameter gradually goes down, and eventually the light sensitivity and with it the sound sensitivity gets better. So this just shows that you can have an upper cervical ligament problem. It can encroach on various nerves, and ultimately you have a pupils that's dilated. The main sympathetic nerves that dilate the pupil are from the superior cervical sympathetic ganglion that sits right at C2 and C3. And then this is just a drawing showing the superior cervical sympathetic ganglion. It connects to a lot of things, including the vagus nerve. I think the vagus nerve input to the superior cervical sympathetic ganglion gets injured or damaged as the vagus nerve gets more degenerated. And the vagus nerve is normally inhibitory. So for instance, in the heart, when the vagus nerve can't inhibit the heart rate in the heart, you get tachycardia, right? Because the vagus nerve, it slows the heart rate, it's inhibitory. Or you can be more prone to getting arrhythmia, such as atrial fibrillation. So the vagus nerve input to the sympathetic system is inhibitory. So the superior cervical sympathetic ganglion, that dilates the pupils, and it's going to dilate it more when the vagus nerve is not inhibiting it. And this is basically what happens. Instead of a nice normal cervical curve, basically people come in and they have a reversal of the curve because of ligament damage from looking down at cell phones for hours and hours and hours, or car accidents or falls or various traumas that involve the neck. So for the case that you're all going to hear, the person that I treated in the office here and is just explaining how they're doing, I just wanted to put this up there because this person had episodes where they could see everything, but they were almost in twilight, or they weren't with it. You know, they were spaced out. So these are termed partial seizures. And I just put this in here, just realize there's many, many diseases and symptoms that are felt to be due to a brain problem. So any disease or symptom that's thought to be due to a brain problem could have as its origin an injury in the neck, because all the nerve impulses flow through the neck, and all the fluid that goes into the brain and out of the brain goes through the neck. So if you have that crazy neck curve that I showed you, that's going to narrow the space in front of the vertebrae. And in that space is the vagus nerve, the carotid artery, and the jugular vein. And when the jugular vein gets compressed, fluid flow in the brain, especially out of the brain, is inhibited. If fluid flow out of the brain is inhibited, and 70% of the fluid in the brain is in the venous system, that's going to raise intracranial pressure, or at minimum, it's going to inhibit or change neuron to neuron activity in the brain. So the brain's not functioning as well. So if a certain part of the brain got irritated or at increased pressure, surely that could be a focus of seizure disorder. And seizures aren't always where a person goes like this. Like you could have a certain part of the brain have a seizure and all you do is space out, like you space out and you're not with it. And people try to wake you up and you're breathing and everything, but you're absolutely not with it. It's almost, you're not totally unconscious, but you're kind of in twilight. And so by correcting the neck curve and stabilizing the neck with prolotherapy, the fluid flow into and out of the brain is restored. You don't have cerebral spinal fluid around cranial nerve 5, cranial nerve 7, so sound sensitivity is better. You don't have irritation of the cervical sympathetic ganglion, so the pupils get to be their normal size, and that can resolve the light sensitivity. And obviously, when the brain pressure gets down to normal, there's not irritation of the temporal lobe from all that fluid, then even seizure disorder can start to abate or remit. This is actually what jugular vein compression looks like. So the atlas or C1, that can encroach on the jugular vein. And what we do is we do curve correction. A patient came in like this. We had them increase their computer height, gave various exercises to do for their neck. This was their neck curve. And then they were basically asymptomatic, and then they had another car accident. And then that's what they came in after another injury. But basically, you could see beautiful curve, straight curve, straight curve. The straight curve, that's what can block the jugular vein. Jugular vein gets blocked. Fluid can go on to the trigeminal nerve or the facial nerve and irritate the superior cervical sympathetic ganglion, and that can lead to all the symptoms such as the patient you're about to hear. I'm here with a fellow Santabellian, JJ Baker. JJ, tell us your story, and how did you end up finding Caring Medical?
Well, originally I got hurt about 13 years ago, and it was a wrestling match with my son. And when I got finished with the match, he'd got me some kind of weird UFC hold, and things started going shaky, and I started having temporal lobe seizures, and I couldn't watch television, I couldn't listen to music and stuff like that. And they never could figure out what was going on with me. And about 2 years later, I got about 70% back. And then you fast forward to about 2 years ago, and I bought some land in Mississippi, and I was working out there in a series of events. And then I woke up one night and it felt like I was having a seizure or some type of stroke or something, and everything was going wacko. Normally I'm 100 miles an hour driving in the car, going checking on houses, and I'm in the rental business and real estate business as well. But I got to where I just couldn't do anything. Like my whole reality was out of whack. Light sensitivity again, hearing sensitivity, my fight or flight in my nervous system, and my heart rate was all out of whack, and I couldn't really pick up a cup of coffee or anything. And so a friend of mine had mentioned y'all, and then I just kind of ignored it. And then I had gone to a physical therapist locally who was friends with a prolotherapy guy in Baton Rouge, and he said, hey, you really want to go see Hauser? I said, I think he is the best in the country, and when it comes to prolotherapy and PRP in the neck and the upper cervical, he is the guy. So I started watching it on YouTube and got my confidence up and called, and I came here, and we actually came down to Sanibel Island and had rented a house here, and we did about 5 sessions with you. You had told me originally to do 9 or 12, and but we had to leave because of the hurricane that came in and destroyed everything. But when I got back, I noticed that I was riding in the car better. My light sensitivity had gone away. My hearing sensitivity had gone away. My nervous system had calmed down. I could actually hold my Bible again and read my Bible, which was a huge thing.
Perfect.
And I could, pick up a plate of food and carry it to where I needed to. And just so many things. My heart rate had dropped, and I was actually riding an exercise bike again, which I hadn't exercised in 2 years. So, I mean, I'm slowly but surely starting to get my life back, which is a huge thing. And I just encourage anybody that is going through these symptoms, and you go to these other doctors and they can't figure out what's wrong with you, please call the Caring Medical and get diagnosed properly. Because you do things here on the diagnosis that other doctors have no clue about. So,
yeah, like you got retested today, and very briefly we went over like your jugular veins are like 2 or 3 times more open. Mm-hmm. So obviously that's going to reduce the brain pressure. But just practically, for maybe somebody who's not familiar with light sensitivity, like I just like to go through your individual symptoms. Mm-hmm. Like, what was it like before and what was it like now? Like, was it that the sun really bothered you and you had to wear sunglasses, and what is it like now?
So I would always have this pressure in the right eye, and it was like I couldn't take in information properly. And when you hit the light would just make it even worse. Like you just couldn't process the information through the lights. And I'd have to be in a calm room with Fluorescent lights were the worst. I couldn't
Like you would never be able to be like this.
Right. And this has not bothered me at all right now. So,
Okay.
and then like the hearing sensitivity was like, I couldn't drown people out when I went to the restaurants. Like I couldn't. Normally, you have something in your brain that can just tune that out, and you can focus on what you're doing. I couldn't tune anybody. I'd hear everybody's conversations. Now I can go into a restaurant and I can focus on my wife. Like we can have a good meal and be okay. Generators would kill me in my hearing sensitivity. Like whatever that pitch in it, and it would just set off something. And I'd just start trembling, and it's like I couldn't process the information, whatever that information was coming from, sound-wise and sight-wise and hearing-wise. And I'd get a tingling in my face, and just these weird symptoms. So.
Were you afraid of loud noises?
I wasn't ever afraid, because Jesus Christ says, "Don't be afraid of anything," and that's really what got me through everything was Jesus. And but if you get hit in the head so many times, you're like, I don't want to be getting hit in the head again. So I actually had gone to Colorado and built a cabin in Colorado where there was just away from people.
Gotcha.
And so I did whatever I can. I bought a car that had air suspension so that when I hit bumps, it wouldn't hurt as bad, and just whatever you could do. So.
Okay. And then explain what symptoms you had with the temporal lobe seizures, or what was it like? Like if I was watching you and you had one of those, what?
So if you were to look at a lake, and the lake was just like glass, and you took a rock and you threw a pebble in it and you created ripples, that's how my reality would go. It was just, your reality would be perfectly fine, and all of a sudden it would just go, just ripples, and you just couldn't, my arm would tighten up, and it was like being in a parallel universe or something. Like you knew where you were, but you just couldn't make sense of things. And
like reality changed.
Right.
And if I was having a conversation with you and you were fine, then you went into one of these episodes. That's how most of the patients describe them to me, episodes. Mm-hmm. You could tell you're not quite there.
Right. You'd be like you're checked out.
Right.
You're just checked out, and you're just kind of aloof. And so, and for me, I talk to hundreds of people all the time, probably 20 or 30 different people a day on several different conversations. And we were talking at high level stuff, because I could do $1 million deals in my head without even thinking about it. And all of a sudden I went from doing that to struggling balancing my checkbook, so the confidence level had dropped, and then I had slowly have been building that back up. So when it affects your speech as well, whatever this is back here, because when it would happen, I couldn't speak as well. I was grasping for words. To have this conversation a year ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So, but now I'm sitting here and I'm doing decently okay.
Would you say that's like 75% better, or do you still have those episodes? Or
those episodes are probably at least 80% better.
Okay, so that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, you really hear now, even though you're doing really well, it's just you're not quite there, but you're all the things are way better.
And you had told me when we started this process that I needed 9 to 10 to 12 of those sessions. We've had 4 or 5. So.
And part of it is, like, I'll give you an example, like, because somebody could say, well, really you're doing fine, but it's what activity level you want to get to. And I always try to give you the real number, to get back to, like, if you guys decided, like you want to go on a cycle tour, go cycling, you want to go running, you want to, you have to have a lot more stability to run and be on a boat, or a skidoo or something than just walking. So
you're talking to a guy who has hiked Colorado, elk hunting Colorado.
Yeah.
I've had horses, I've been horseback ridden, and I mean, cycled, and you just did everything. I was fully into life, and then to be jerked out is painful. But I can tell you that if you trust the Lord and what He's doing in your life, and you go into the Word, and there's something He's wanting you to figure out, and so there is hope. And so He led through. I believe the Lord led me here because you are a Christian, and you understand His ways, and He's given you insight to something that other doctors don't have insight into. So and now that all that was taken away from me, and now He's slowly giving it back to me, but he does it in a way where do it when you're honoring Him and you're giving Him all the glory for it.
Was there ever a time, because, think about it, like you have a strong faith, life's going good, then things tank. You obviously probably with your wife and everything prayed a lot, and then, years go by. Was there ever a time where you doubted? Like you doubted God, or you were losing faith, or?
Well, thank God I had gotten to a place in my walk when all this had happened. Well, originally 13 years ago, we were going to church and we were in church, but it wasn't until I got hurt the first time where the TV got taken away, the music got taken away, and the interacting with people got taken away, that I just read my Bible all the time. And when I did go to church, I was tuned in because I wanted to figure out what was going on. So when this happened the second time, and it was worse than the first time, had I not had Jesus, I don't know what I would have done.
Okay.
Because I was sitting on the front porch and my reality's out of whack. That vagus nerve, it controls so much when it, because you had said that my C0 was slipping off of the C1, which is pulled on that vagus nerve. And it makes you emotional. Like when I looked at my wife and I say, I love you, it'd be like 1,000 times more, and you start crying because you just love her, and then, so, you don't know what's going on. So I would sit on my front porch. We live out in the country, and we have a big lake in front of our house and stuff. And I would just say, God, I don't know what you're doing, and you don't have to tell me because you're God, and I accept whatever that is. And when you become a Christian, you're supposed to die to self anyway.
That's fair.
And so I just knew that, hey, I'm in your hands, God. And when I start just saying that and saying, God, I trust in your ways are higher than my ways, and that's when He led us here. So,
Yeah, and you would agree that many times people aren't, having their faith be the primary thing in their life, but when, like you said, when everything gets taken away or you have chronic pain, like C.S. Lewis said, pain was the megaphone through which God speaks, because when a human being has awful pain, and the doctors, you go to the doctors and they have limited abilities, and it's like, then you start searching after God, and God says in the Bible that if you search for Him with all your heart, you'll find Him. And that's like where the disconnect is, because people don't do it with all their heart.
Seek first the kingdom of God and all the rest shall follow. But I just encourage everybody, don't give up. Don't give up, because I've been to neurologists that have said crazy, stupid stuff. I've been to the best in Houston, the best in Baton Rouge, the best anywhere I could find. And it wasn't until that God brought me here to you that I started having improvement. So I would just tell everybody, at your worst, when you're just at your complete worst and you're ready just to give up, I'm gonna tell you a story. So there was two miners. They were in the mine, and the mine caved in on them. Okay. And they dug and dug and dug, and they were trying to get out, and they were digging and digging. And one of the guys said, you know what, I'm done, I'm giving up. And he laid down and died. The other guy said, you know what, I'm gonna give it 20 more minutes. And he kept digging, and he started seeing sunlight, and he gave out. He got out of the mine because he just gave it one more try. So I would encourage everybody just to give it one more try, just one more step in front of the other step, and just keep putting one more step in front of the other one. And just some days you're not going to be as good as other days, and know that life is hard, and just hold on. You got it. And God's going to bring you, if you have these symptoms that we're talking about today, I would very strongly encourage you to come to Caring Medical and get the right diagnosis and get treatment going in the right way. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be, the treatments aren't easy, but if you get down here and you get the treatments and you start getting, just think in your mind, where am I? Write it down. Where am I right now? Get the first treatment, and then 3 or 4 weeks later you say, well, this is better. This is better. I've noticed this is better. And then that's what encouraged me too along the way, is just I was having these minimum gains, So there's a story, I don't know if you know this story, England had never won a Tour de France. And they hired this guy, I forgot his name, he came on board. And his biggest change that he made for everybody was minimum gains. So he made his cyclers sleep on the right pillow, the right mattress to get the best sleep that they could get, eat the right foods to get the best nourishment they could get. They would change things on the bike for minimum gains, but the minimum gains allowed them to win. I think they won like 7 or 8 Tour de France's in a row after just small gains, small gains, small gains. And those small gains turn into big gains after time. So
That's a great story.
yeah.
Thank you so much, my brother.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your help.